Okay, the moment we've been waiting for. Thank you, Jordan. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our main speaker for tonight, Adam T.
My name's Adam. I'm an alcoholic. I want to thank the group. Thank you for inviting me to come talk tonight. It's always an honor and a privilege to be asked to participate in Alcoholics Anonymous. Ultimately, it's a responsibility to give back what was so freely given to me. Thank Patrick for inviting me, Wendy for driving me here, Joel for putting me up, Darby for that great dinner, Ryan for driving me from the airport, all you guys. Thank everybody else that managed to get me here, Alex. Welcome to people that are new. You know, if you're trying AA again, if you don't want to be here tonight, if you don't think Alcoholics Anonymous will work for you, you know, if your sponsor made you come to this, you know, I didn't get to AA because I had a bad weekend. You know, I had a couple of bad decades. And for me, like a lot of us, eventually this becomes a matter of life and death. I mean, every meeting has their perpetual newcomer, especially if you live in a small community. We see that lost soul recycling through the rooms. I live in Los Angeles. We have 3,000 meetings a week in the greater LA area. I know Patrick from that area, and I stood up for 17 years. I had so many chips and key tags. Horrific. I remember one secretary saying, "Give them back." You know, and I did that walk of shame over and over and over again. And looking back at that experience now, if you're new, I thank God for the unconditional love of the old timers. A lot of the old timers in our area that aren't with us anymore. A lot of those old guys that died were 30, 40 years sober, and they watched me come in and out of the rooms, and they would say things to me like, don't even bother taking chips. Just sit in the back. Shut up. No, but in a loving way, right? But they made it really clear to me, and if you're new, I hope you hear this. They made it really clear to me that if and when I was ready, because I think somehow they could see it. The old timers could see it. They could see it by my demeanor. They could see it by my lack of interest. They could see it possibly by my fidgety nature. From their experience of years of watching people come in and out of Alcoholics Anonymous, I think maybe by my attitude they could see it wasn't right now. But they were so kind, they were so gracious, they were so forgiving, they were so tolerant of my bad behavior. They were so, they were so kind to me. They were really kind to me. And they made it really clear to me, if you're new tonight, that if and when I was ready, that the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous would always be open to a drunk like me. And I think looking back at that experience now, if you're new, Alcoholics Anonymous is probably the closest thing to unconditional love that a drunk like me will ever experience. No matter how many people I burned, how many lives I destroyed, how many cars I wrecked, how many jobs I lost, how many hearts I broke, how many despicable, shameful things I did. And if you are, in fact, an alcoholic, it's the most shameful thing in the world to be the family drunk. Especially if you come from a large family like I do, where my mom had 3 sisters and a brother, my dad had 3 brothers and a sister. And I remember I would cringe. She would be on the phone with her sisters telling them everything. You know, one more rubber room, one more overdose, one more car wreck. Happy birthday, Dad, I'm in jail. I mean, does anybody here relate to being paid not to come home on the holidays? It was awful, awful. I mean, we would have relatives from all over the country, from Europe and all over the place coming to, to visit us. And I'd be in Mexico with some poor guy's car. They did not know what to do with me. It was so heartbreaking. And if you're new tonight, for at least the 10 years, I was so self-centered that probably for the first decade of my recovery, I was unable to see through the lens of Al-Anon. I couldn't see it. But I was a straight A student. I was the top of all my classes. I was an only child. My mom and dad were married over 50 years. I did not come from a broken home. And to watch, because it doesn't really, those are all outside issues in a way. Despite all of that, to watch my mom and dad literally watch their only son, which was really an extension of the family tree, all their hopes rode on me. To watch them watch me burn my life to the ground to the point where eventually she had sold the family property, she moved, and she did not leave a forwarding address. That's where I left my mother. And despite all of that, if you're new tonight, the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous has always been open to people like me. If I lived to be 100 years old, I could never pay AA back. for the love and kindness that, you know what, some of you people have shown me. Not all. I mean, come on, if you like everybody in AA, you know what it means? It means you're probably not going to enough meetings. My sponsor said, you don't have to like anyone in particular here, but if you go through the steps and the traditions, like our first speaker said, you'll learn to love people here you don't even like. People that are difficult, people that are condescending, people that are sarcastic, people that are demeaning. I mean, AA, no disrespect, it is not the hotbed of mental health. You know, but if I've learned anything in all these years sober, it is not only how to not take things personally, but compassion for my fellow man. You cannot go through inventory after inventory after inventory with God's kids and not develop compassion and understanding for the human condition. And when I see that condescending, sarcastic, difficult person that was so mean to me, even in the rooms of AA, when I see him outside a liquor store, pissing in his pants, trying to get another drink, if you're like me, my heart still breaks for him. There is something very unique about this if you're new. It's almost like the worse off you are, the better chance you have of recovery. Eventually, I started coming to meetings drunk. It's very interesting. We don't see a lot of wet alcoholics in AA anymore. And of course, I don't want to bash the therapeutic community. I saw the druggy buggy out there. But for me, yeah, no disrespect. I mean, treatment would swoop me up in my most desperate moments, throw me into yoga class. I mean, I'm doing the downward dog. It's supposed to fix me, right? Craft hour. I'm making belt buckles and bongs. They don't know what to do with me. You just heard it in the preamble. Nature walks, I'm walking to 7-Eleven, getting a big gulp cup, filling it up with liquor, putting a little Coke on top, walking into the late night Hollywood candlelight meeting, doing some of my best sharing. You know, then I started going through institutions. And it's funny, if you're new tonight, we have a chapter in the book, Chapter to Wives. Anybody read the Chapter to Wives? I never read it. And not to be funny, I mean, I never had a wife. Not of my very own. I know this is church, but I thought I'd stir it up a little bit. Get the Al-Anons, wake them up. But it's interesting because the Chapter to Wives is very descriptive and it really describes the progression of alcoholism, right? Fun with problems, just problems, magic, medicine, misery. It enumerates these 4 types. And the 4th type of alcoholic that's described in the Chapter to Wives, if you read the chapter, is the type of alcoholic that's been placed in one institution after another. Sound familiar? Type of alcoholic that typically drinks on his way home from the hospital. And in the 17 years that I recycled through Alcoholics Anonymous, albeit in one of the largest AA groups in the world, I still became that 4th type. By the time I finally got sober in Alcoholics Anonymous, I'd gone through residential treatment for alcoholism 28 times. Right, not 28 days like the movie, this isn't Hollywood. 28 consecutive times, and I'm wearing that like some kind of badge of honor. I'm thinking that's what makes me an alcoholic. And I made the mistake, I remember telling my sponsor I went through treatment 28 times. I was hoping that would like get rid of the guy, you know, loser. Had one of those overzealous sponsors chasing me around with a big book. I know you got a couple here. And I didn't want to ruin his batting average, right? So I tell him I went through treatment 28 times. And he starts laughing like you guys. And I'm like, I don't think that's funny. And he looks at me and he laughs and he says, you know, Adam, going through treatment 28 times does not make you an alcoholic. And I thought, you're kidding? He says, oh no, that just means you paid $500,000 for a big book. And I didn't think that was funny. And I'm not going to start citing and quoting pages tonight out of the big book. But page 101 of the big book says any scheme that attempts to shield the alcoholic from temptation is doomed to failure. See, treatment was a great place to fat me up for another run. Treatment has its rightful place in recovery. Even Bill Wilson had gone through treatment. Silkworth says we favor hospitalization or treatment for the alcoholic that's befogged or jittery, right? If you ever wonder what all the treatment centers and religions have in common, it's kind of obvious. They all send their drunks here. They send them to us. Some people don't go through treatment, certainly not a prerequisite for Alcoholics Anonymous. But if you're new tonight, my experience for me is that for me, treatment never solved the problem. And as an alcoholic, like a lot of us, I always thought the problem was liquor. I thought it was alcohol. And I remember someone in Alcoholics Anonymous saying to me, Adam, if alcohol is your problem, that drink, that shot glass, that 12-pack, that $200 bottle of Chardonnay, if that's your problem, you're probably not an alcoholic. And then he paused, and in the very next breath he says to me, and if you are in fact an alcoholic, the type that's described in the doctor's opinion in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, your problem isn't alcohol. And I'm like, what? It took another decade for me to understand what he was trying to tell me. It was almost like some kind of cruel riddle. I drank over that for years. But what happened, I mean, if you're new, you'll hear that. Pay attention when you hear it. Just like what happened to Ebby when he came and visited Bill, and Bill had said he was inwardly reorganized. He saw something superficially different, inexplainably different about Ebby. And what happened to me, if you're new tonight, is I got around a group of big book literalists, enthusiasts, people in Alcoholics Anonymous that took the statements in the big book, turned them into questions, directed the questions at me. Very simple ideas. Like, was I incapable of being honest with myself? Did I in fact drink because I liked the effect produced by alcohol? Well, duh, that's a no-brainer, right? How about this if you're new? Could I be or was I restless, irritable, and discontent by nature? Was that my natural state before my lips ever touched alcohol? What a powerful question. Was my greatest obsession that somehow, someday I would control and enjoy my drinking at the same time? And then the evidence, the proof. Did I pursue that illusion, meaning just out of reach to the gates of insanity and death? And if you're new tonight, what happened to me as I went through those considerations is for the first time I saw the truth. And the most obvious truth, what we call the external unmanageability, was crystal clear. From the time I was in middle school, I remember being in 8th grade, I was already pissing in my pants. I was already passed out under the bleachers. I was already drooling on my desk. I overshot the mark from the very first time my lips touched alcohol. My nickname in 8th grade was Space Cadet. I couldn't find homeroom. I mean, people are picking high schools. I'm already picking rehabs, right? But if you're new tonight, alcoholism comes in people. It doesn't come in bottles or 6-packs or 12-packs or kegs or shot glasses or little bottles of wine. Alcoholism comes in people. And the greater aspect of this spiritual illness, as Bill Wilson describes it, centering in my mind, if going through the considerations in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous shows me anything at all. It shows me that an alcoholic of my type, an alcoholic of this type, cannot really live without alcohol, not successfully, not happily. And part what it really means for me to be an alcoholic, if I'm honest about my relationship with liquor, is that I have a mind that will continue to take me back to that first drink. Every time I get released from an emergency room, a hospital, a fancy Malibu treatment center, right? Men's Central Jail, 5743, roll it up. It's amazing to me. I've been incarcerated more times than I can count. That's who you got up here to speak tonight. And I'm sitting in county jail in my little cell, on my cot, casually reading a novel, not a cloud on the horizon. And I hear that release number 57431, roll it up, you're being released. And suddenly, I have this visceral compulsion in me that is so powerful that I'm vomiting on my way to the liquor store just with anticipation. And you think at that point, I'm gonna call my sponsor? It's the last guy I'm gonna call. As soon as I hear that release number, that compulsion in me is so powerful, I can't even stop at the release module for my property. And I come to AA, and I know people mean well when they say, well, don't drink no matter what. And I'm like, what? What happened at the top of page 24 where it says, every alcoholic passes through the state where even the strongest desire is of absolutely no avail? It says, for some of us, my willpower will become virtually non-existent. And I think it's important to say this. The doctor's opinion talks about many of us, not all of us, some of us are entirely normal in every respect except the effect produced by alcohol. Normal, able, friendly people. That is not who I am. That is a type. It is not who I am. And I'll make it real simple if you're new tonight. I got a car at home. It's got no brakes. I know the car's got no brakes. In fact, I live on a hill. Now, I take that car out of gear, You know what's going to happen? Same thing that happens every time. Take out 2 or 3 cars on the way down that hill. I shoot that stop sign, maybe try to make that left, see if I don't hit the curb, run a couple more lights, try to graze a few onto the freeway. I know I got a car with no brakes. Now, there's a lot of guys, they know they got a car with no brakes. They don't drive no matter what, and they'll tell you that. Somehow they still have the ability to do that. And if you're new tonight, loss of control is the cover charge for Alcoholics Anonymous. But see, I just want to sit in the car. I remember all the places I went in that car. I'm not going to take it out of gear. If you gave me a lie detector test, it would tell you I was not going to take that car out of gear. That's why we say if the drink doesn't get you, the lifestyle will. And that is something totally different. If you're new tonight, that's called loss of choice. You know, we were chatting with Wendy about the first step, this idea, right? Loss of choice is a death sentence if you're new tonight. But there's something even greater than that. And it's called loss of power. And it's something that we've talked about in all the readings tonight. That word power is used 25 times in We Agnostic. It means the lens through which I see the world is so distorted that my own loving mother says to me, for goodness sake, son, please drink. You were nicer. Have a cigarette while you're at it, because you're destroying my house. And if you're new tonight, unless I can develop that sense of comfort and ease that I'm seeking from alcohol through this spiritual process, a drunk like me will never stay here. I mean, think about it. Alcohol is classified by the AMA as a depressant, right? 9 out of 10 people, they have a couple drinks and they're like, gosh, it's getting late. I got work tomorrow. I'm beginning to feel it. I have a couple drinks and honey, I want to get married. Right? I want to go to Vegas tonight. Now, if you get a ticket tonight to Vegas, it's about $1,400. If you wait 2 weeks, it's $60. They know we're coming. They know. See, I have a couple drinks. I'm trying to find the car keys I hid from myself before the first drink. Right? That's the insanity of alcoholism. And insanity, we talk about doing the same thing and expecting different results. We hear that all the time. But there's another kind of insanity, doing the same thing, knowing exactly what's going to happen and what? Doing it anyway. See, normal people, they drink, they feel out of control. What happens? I drink and I feel in control. See, I drink, you suffer. I don't drink, I suffer. And I started to understand that what really happens to people like me is I stop drinking, and it's almost like the outsides get better, but the insides get worse. And that simple idea, that little dash, a lot of people I know, you know, they drank with me, they did all those terrible things while drinking, and they come to AA, they stop drinking, and it's almost magical. They come to meetings, never work a step, take another anniversary cake. They've been serene since their butt hit the seat in AA. That's not my experience. My experience, every time I stop drinking, they say, you know, you really need to be on medication. Right? Why are you so angry? Why are you so emotional? Why can't you sit still? What's wrong with you? And I'm crying at dog food commercials. And like the book says, what happens to me when I'm not drinking is the bedevilments on page 52 start to become very apparent to me. And I know it's Bill Wilson's language, but it fit me like a glove. When I'm not drinking, and if you're new tonight, you might want to ask these questions. When I'm not drinking, am I prey to misery and depression? When I'm not drinking, am I still having trouble controlling my emotional nature? Well, I'm jumping up and down on some guy's hood in traffic. I think so, right? You know, when I'm not drinking, am I still having trouble with my personal relationships? Sound familiar? When I'm not drinking, am I full of fear? When I'm not drinking, am I basically unhappy? And with all my education, all my experience, all my so-called wisdom, I could not solve that problem. And my sponsor drove me into a corner and he said, you need a God. And until I understood that, until I saw that the longest bridge I would ever cross, the longest journey I would ever walk as an alcoholic is that little dash between the first and second half of step one. It's telling me, obviously, I got a body that can't process alcohol. That's obvious. What's not so obvious is the second half, that I have a mind that can't process reality, not to my liking. So I got a body that can't drink and a mind that has to. You don't think that's a dilemma? And that's what the Al-Anons can't figure out about us. They can't figure out why we drink, and we can't figure out why you don't. And I thought for years, because I drink, therefore my life's unmanageable. And that's really, if you're new tonight, like looking at the tip of an iceberg and seeing the ruined marriage, broken home, financial destitution, the failing health, and thinking that's the problem. In fact, that's what treatment tells me the problem is. That's why I'm sitting in another fancy treatment center in my nightgown, learning about my triggers. And I'm like, excuse me, counselor, waking up's a trigger for me, I'm awake. And the counselor's like, sir, will you please go back to your dorm and button up your nightgown? They don't know what to do with me. And if you're new tonight, see, what I discovered through the 12-step process is for people like me, the trigger is actually on the inside. Do you ever notice when an alcoholic's not having a good day? Come on, it's when I'm not getting my way. We're all like 5-year-old kids here with old people's faces. Oh, you don't believe it? Cross one of us. I was telling my friends outside, we were talking about Al-Anon. I got this friend, and he's like, he's 30 years sober, right? You think by now he would have learned, but he said for 30 years he'd go to work, buy a sandwich, come home. I was telling Pat about this. Every day, goes to work, buys a sandwich, comes home. Every day, 30 years, goes to work, buys a sandwich, and his wife's watching this. And one day his wife says, you know, I see that. You go to work, you buy a sandwich, you come home. His wife says, why don't you buy 2 sandwiches? And he says, you know, I don't think I could eat 2. Think twice before you date one of us. I was telling my buddy over here, my friend with 50 years sober, he goes, I just want to do what I want to do, when I want to do it, and if anybody gets in my way, I'm hard to live with. Now, at some point in my recovery, there had to be a concession. There had to be a place where I relinquished that control. And the book is so powerful when it says our thought life will be placed on a higher plane. When it's cleared of wrong motives. If you're new tonight, if my motive is selfishness and self-centeredness, everything in my life reflects entitlement and expectation. And see, this radical shift, the paradigm, is that what if my life is driven by service-centeredness, other-centeredness, God-centeredness? Then everything in my life reflects kindness and it reflects love. So you can't plant corn and harvest potatoes. And that simple idea changed the entire way that I looked at my life, the lens through which I saw the world for the first time. That famous line by Carl Jung, who was a student of Sigmund Freud, page 27, I hate to quote pages, but he says, ideas, attitudes, and emotions that are once the guiding force of people like me are suddenly cast to one side and a whole new set of conceptions begins to dominate them. And you were talking about it. You talked about the traditions, and then you talked about the steps, the transformation. The information plus application equals transformation. These are like very simple mathematical equations to change the way I see the world. And when I look back, if you're new tonight, it's 17 years of suffering in Alcoholics Anonymous, 17 years of being a newcomer. What I see, if you're new, is my defiance towards spiritual principles. The original manuscript in this book used to say, rarely have we seen a person fail that's thoroughly followed our directions. Now, if you're like me, I don't like directions. In fact, I don't like being told not to do something I already don't want to do, right? I will argue with anybody about anything at any time. You tell me it's black, I'll tell you it's white. You tell me it's big, I'll tell you it's small. You tell me to go left, I'll go right with an attitude. Oh, and then I'll blame you for eternity. That's why we say denial's an acronym. It stands for don't even notice I am lying. Think about it. You could tell an alcoholic. You can't tell them much. Oh, you don't believe it? Try sponsoring somebody. And what that means, if you're new tonight, is you can lead me into the gates of hell, but you can't push me into heaven. And when we talk about attraction rather than promotion in the 11th tradition, what that eventually came to mean for me as an alcoholic is eventually I would come back to Alcoholics Anonymous on my own terms. Not because Sober Living wanted me to, not because my parole officer wanted me to, not because DCSF thought it was a good idea. I mean, where I live on the west side of Los Angeles, they all come in, to save the trust fund. But if you're like me, hope doesn't matter to me until I'm hopeless. You think hope matters to me when I got $1 million left in the bank, brand new Harley, little truck in the driveway, boat down in the marina? You wouldn't catch me dead in an AA meeting. And if you're new tonight, my experience is that God didn't matter to me until my back was against the wall. And this isn't gutter bravado. I've got the scars. I got shot in a little argument, went right through me. And I remember this like it was yesterday. I'm laying on this gurney. I'm still awake. And I got the paramedics over me with the little paddles. And you know what? All I know is God. I mean, if you're new tonight, if you've ever been faced with your mortality, there's only two things men cry for: mommy and God. Right? Anybody had their head in the toilet with the dry heaves, throwing up their esophagus? Come on. Who prays more than drunks like us? Right? I mean, I'm going to lead the world in a couple of areas. One of them is praying. And what's so interesting about that, if you're new tonight, is Bill Wilson has this powerful white light experience. And on the very next page, it says, it was quickly blotted out by worldly clamors, most of which were within himself. So they stuck a tampon right through my chest. That's the way they deal with gunshot wounds. And at that moment, I'd never been closer to God in my life. I was as close as I would ever be. I was scared to death. And my conscience came to me, and all I wanted to do was tell my mom how much I loved her. I had realized at that point, all of it came to that moment where I knew I wasn't going to get to tell her how sorry I was and beg for her forgiveness. So I get to the hospital, and I'm in the ER, and the cardiologist does a thing called an angiogram where he runs this cord through my groin and he pumps this dye through my heart onto a TV screen, and he looks at me and he smiles and he says, "Oh, the bullet missed. You're going to be fine." It missed all the vital organs. And I went from, "God, I will do anything you ask." The very next thought is, I need to get out of here before law enforcement shows up, and where's my bottle? And like a prize fighter, this idea that I'll throw in the towel and then I'll take that towel back one little piece at a time. I'll take my will back. And the very things that Alcoholics Anonymous gives me, the big job, the nice house, the peaceful life, the relationship, are the very things that eventually make Alcoholics Anonymous inconvenient. And what I did over and over again is I would build Alcoholics Anonymous around this big life. And my sponsor said, it's like kind of like, you know, being in the program and on the program. He says he likened it to being in a submarine or on a submarine. Now, when the ship takes a dive, you'll find out if you're in it or on it. And that very simple idea, and what it really is, if you're new tonight, is that there's a huge difference between the act of surrender that got me into Alcoholics Anonymous over and over and over again, and the state of surrender that's keeping the old timers here. It's a completely different concept. It's kind of like watching a swan glide across a pond of still water. It's so beautiful. It's so effortless. It's so graceful. But looking at that idea, we all know what that swan's doing under the water. He's paddling like hell. And if you're new tonight, we have a chapter in the book, Into Action. Anybody notice there's no chapter into feelings? No offense to the therapist. You know, into thinking. We ought to have a chapter into whining right from the podium at the noon meeting. I'm like, get a job. And if you're new tonight, this is not to be funny. There's this beautiful story in the back of the book, and it's called The Keys of the Kingdom. And what she says is, now there is a feeling of being wanted, needed, and loved. And she says, in place of a bottle and a hangover, she'd been given the keys of the kingdom. And in the therapeutic community, there's a therapy called cognitive behavioral therapy. It's very expensive. Now, in AA, it's $2, and you just put it in there, right? And the basic idea is I can't live my way into right living or right thinking, but I can live my way into right thinking. I can't think my way into right living, but I can live my way into right thinking. And what happened to me, if you're new tonight, is I became willing to take actions in Alcoholics Anonymous I did not believe in. And my sponsor took that triangle off the front of this lectern right here, and he told me that that triangle equaled 3 simple verbs: to contribute, belong, and learn. That contributing is service, and if I do it, I will feel needed. If I come to meetings, and I always come to meetings half an hour early. Because if you go to a party early, if you come late, you feel like an outsider. You come to a party early, you help set up the party, you help the host put out everything, you feel like it's your party. Then you can judge the people that come late, right? So unity is to belong. And I started to come to meetings, and I started to, you want to feel wanted around here? Just like Patrick said, come to sign yourself as the greeter at a meeting you've never been to before. And you'll know more people than a guy that's been there for 20 years. See, I can't separate cause from effect. And the more I uncover, discover, and discard that which is blocking me from God, self, and others, if you're new tonight, the more I can bilaterally give and receive love. It just adds up that way. It's spiritual math. My relationship with God, my relationship with self, my relationship with others, if you put it on a blackboard, it would equal Main Street detox. And what happened to me through taking these actions, I did not yet believe in, is for the first time in my life, like she said in that story, I started to feel wanted, needed, and loved. In a place of a bottle and a hangover, right? When she talked about the keys of the kingdom, it meant that for the first time in my life, I would feel protected by some kind of God, whether I believed in it or not. In 4 through 7, I would be accepted by self, and that last piece, connected to a community. It is said that alcoholism is the only disease, when treated, that will actually leave the sufferer in a better position than if I never, ever had the disease. I'd have never believed it. I would have never believed it. And I remember my sponsor stood in front of me outside this hospital, and he looked at me and he said, Adam, how free do you want to be? You want to be free enough to just survive this? Coming to meetings late, leaving early, not having commitments, not being of service? Or he said, do you want to be free enough to chase your dreams? Free enough to have relationships that work, free enough to navigate around the drama, free enough to match calamity with serenity, free enough to stay, as we say, in fit spiritual condition. And like a lot of us, the people that are here tonight, what happened to me, that idea again, what happened is I became teachable. The longest trip, as I was telling somebody before the meeting, isn't from my head to my heart. That's a therapeutic idea. The longest trip for me as a drunk was from my knees to the ground. And only at that point did I become teachable. And if you're new, thank God we don't look like our stories, right? So what happened to me is I got to one more treatment center, 120 pounds, dying of alcoholism, missing a couple teeth. You know how we look. A vision for you. I'm in a nightgown with my ass hanging out, judging the speaker. It's funny how we're the only people that can be on the curb and still look down at the world. I got 2 speeds, grandiose and comatose. I'm strutting around the detox, bragging about robbing Brinks trucks. I finally did my 4-step. It was a bread truck. It was empty. So I'm sitting there in this treatment center, and this woman comes in, if you're new tonight, on what's called an H&I panel. I don't know if you have that here, treatment and corrections, but H&I stands for hospitals and institutions. It's a committee that brings meetings into prisons, detoxes, treatment centers, hospitals. We also call it homies and inmates. But anywhere where clients, patients, or inmates can't get to meetings. And ours meets on the second Monday of the month. It's about this big, literally. You get like 250 people in this H&I meeting, come on a Monday night. They're fighting each other to talk to people in treatment centers that don't care. But I think H&I probably has one of the lowest relapse rates in all of recovery. So this woman's on this panel. She's doing her AA talk. We're in the audience. She does this beautiful talk. And at the end of her talk, she looks us all up and down and she says, if I could give you all the gift of recovery, I wouldn't do it. And I looked at her and I looked at the guy next to me and I remember saying, what a bitch. No disrespect. And then she said something that would later change my life. She said, the reason I wouldn't give you the gift of recovery, the reason I wouldn't give it to you is because I wouldn't rob you of the journey. All these years later, if you're new tonight, that journey to recovery, just like that journey to surrender that each and every alcoholic has to walk, all of us, if you're new, is personal. We cannot give that to you. That cannot be manufactured. You know, treatment's now got a little pill they say it'll take away my cravings. My mom's like, can they give you a pill, stop you chasing women and riding motorcycles? I'm like, are you kidding me? It doesn't work like that. If you take booze away from me, you have to give me something better. And again, not to be divisive, if you're new and you're sitting in a hot tub with a supermodel, a fifth of whiskey and an 8-ball, and daddy sends you to rehab, we don't expect you to be happy. I mean, the stuff you hear at AA. I remember being 16. I know there's a couple of youngsters in here. I was like 16, 17 at AA and, LA, and the old timers were like, you know what, kid, we spilled more than you drank. We're like, you know what, Pops, we didn't spill any. That's why we got here sooner. I was such a smart aleck. But, they say a lot of stuff like, oh, my worst day sober's better than my best day drinking. Are you out of your mind? But my worst day sober is better than my last day drinking. That last 5 years where the disease killed me every day and it wouldn't bury me kind of drinking. When I'm beating down that liquor store door at 5:59 a.m. over and over and over again. Or paying the clerk at 7-Eleven $100 for a six-pack after closing, or driving to Mexico to get at the bars, or doing all those disgusting, diabolical, despicable things that many of us did on that journey to pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. Because I thought it was the gift of desperation. But you know what fixes desperation? A $10,000 check from mommy. Right? Credit on a Sunday. But see, hopelessness is very different. And I'm sitting in a $2 million house, which probably is like 10 now, in Newport Beach, on a piss-soaked mattress with everything money can buy, and I know the next drink's gonna kill me, and I can't stop myself. That's hopelessness. And if you're new tonight, I hope you search your heart for that. That type of hopelessness. Because eventually what happened to me is I got to a place where my head couldn't get enough and my body couldn't take anymore. And I'm so lucky I lived through that. Skid Row's full of people like that. I was on Skid Row last night talking in a meeting. When my head can't get enough and my body can't take anymore, just like in your readings, God means something totally different and something very practical. It means grow or die. Then I'm faced with a fork in the road, like we talked about in the beginning of this meeting. Faced with alcoholic destruction or to live on a spiritual basis. It says these are not easy alternatives. Really? Go on to the bitter end, blotting out the consciousness of your intolerable situation, or accept spiritual help. Now, if you did a survey at Walmart, you got jails, institutions, and death, happy, joyous, and free. It's a no-brainer. You step over to my cell in Men's Central Jail, you present me with that question, I'm scratching my head thinking, how about an alcoholic death? Can I talk to my counselor, my therapist, my parole officer, my MFT, my attorney, and get back to you on Monday? One of the definitions of codependency is doing something for someone else that they should be doing for themselves. Every one of those ideas slowed down the process. See, there's a saying, God can't use a man till he comes to the end of himself. And what I didn't understand is that first half of step one is me defending my right to drink. The rest of my life, me defending my right to play God. That actor trying to be the director, right? And it talks about the scenario, but what I didn't see is I'd given God a role in my play. That was a very powerful idea. And what I discovered, if you're new tonight, for me, working with lots of people, you kind of see it, that from Yale to jail, Park Avenue to Park Bench, the bottom is really the same for all of us. In many ways, it's twofold. And it's just like in Dr. Bob's story where he says, do you want to stop for good and for all? It's right in his story. And then the other part is, do you feel like you need help? See, the bottom was, it was when I asked for help, but there's something, millions of people. You know how many people come to AA? If everybody came through these doors alone at this meeting, we'd be in a stadium tonight. But the more important thing is when I'm actually willing to receive it. And that we beg of you if you're new. I'll simplify it. I throw you a life raft and you're like, I was looking for a blue one. Right? I mean, how do you work with someone like that? See, it's that second piece. I really don't like the way you threw it, bro. Right? And so many people die. So many people die. I've wanted to say this. I wanted to share with the first speaker. There's this, you were talking about the spider web. And we have these amazing haunted houses, like on Halloween and stuff. And one of the ideas with a haunted house is if you go into one of these $1 million haunted houses, and I want to thank Joel because I'm in a haunted house tonight. And I'm so excited about it. I'm hoping don't try to scare me, but. So if you go into one of these haunted houses, the first time you go through the house, it's terrifying. You step on a little button, you fall through the floor, you step on another button, a big spider comes out. It's terrifying, even for tough guys. But if you go through that haunted house the second time, you have the gift of anticipation. By the third time you go through that haunted house, you look around and you kind of see the tracks. You see how they built it. By the fourth time, you could build it. Imagine what that's like, holding another person's hand and walking him through that haunted house the first time. That's the fifth step. That for the first time, I started to understand this idea that it is fear that drives selfishness. It's fear that drives dishonesty. It's fear that drives resentment. And until I saw that all fear in many ways is agnosticism, and I was walked through that process in that fourth and fifth step, where it talks about why do I have the fear? And I was thinking about, there's this beautiful story, and I know you get a lot of ice here, and these two explorers are coming across this part of the country in the 1800s, and they have to cross this huge lake of ice. This big, beautiful lake of ice. And they have to because they're gonna get shut out in the winter and they're gonna die. And one of them is like Indiana Jones. He's just a wild man. And the other guy is like an accountant. He's really scared. No offense to the CPAs, but this guy is so scared, he doesn't wanna do it. But they gotta walk across this lake of ice. So the first guy's playing the guitar and he's stomping across this ice and he's singing and he's having this great time. And the other guy is terrified. Every step he takes, he's so scared. They get into the middle of this lake of ice and they both fall in and drown. You know what the moral of the story is? One guy had a great day. Oh, I know, it's ugly. But the meaning of that is that it will end for all of us. But I am done living in fear. What happened to me through the process of the 12 step is I got free of it. I got free of the fear. And before that had happened, I had lived in a completely different world. And again, not to bash the therapeutic community, but going through treatment 28 times. I started to speak a foreign language in treatment. You guys know what it is, right? It's called victimese. Like, I don't understand how the drink bone connects to the jail bone. Like, I need a class for that. What are they calling that now? Relapse prevention. It's kind of like I met her in rehab. I can't believe she drank. Now, that's funny, but it's not funny to the new people. They're in that right now. Rehab romance. I knew he was a crackhead. I can't believe he stole my iPhone. Now, you guys are laughing, but see, the book talks about how I make decisions based on self that later leave me in a position to be hurt. If you're new, until I connected those dots through inventory, I could not get free. I had died 1,000 deaths in my life because of that fear. It talks about commencing to outgrow fear, to be restored in the second step to the original self, the self that lives without fear. What would that be like? To live a life that was free of fear. To live a life without that inner narrative that I'm no good, that I'm not enough. To live a life without resentment, that faulty emotional attachment to people, places, and things. Could that really be possible? And what happened to me again is going through this process, I started to get free of it. And it's funny because if you're new tonight, we're the only people that want a reward because we ran out of a burning building. I mean, if you're feeling heroic because you gave up your big, Saturday night in Denver to hang out with us, this is the only place on God's earth where they'll applaud because you came in to save your own life. You're wondering when the miracle's going to happen. You're in an AA meeting on a Saturday night, the miracle's happened. I was told my sobriety is God's gift to me. What I do with it is my gift to God. There are 3 prayers in this life. The first one, God help me. It's the alcoholic prayer. Second prayer, God give me. But the prayer I'd never said was, God use me. And Patrick calls me. And I could not be more grateful to be useful. And if you're new tonight, see, fear won't keep me here. Getting a 3rd strike, living on the street, being homeless, losing my career. Did Scared Straight work for you? Went right over my head. Now, the big book, interesting enough, talks about the problem drinker and illustrates the problem drinker as someone that can stop or moderate given sufficient reason. Big difference between a problem drinker and a real alcoholic. Think about it. You get a problem drinker and a real alcoholic in a drunk tank for drunk driving, you got 2 completely different philosophies going on. You got the problem drinker over here on one side of the cell thinking, man, I knew I shouldn't have drank so much last night. Why did I drink so much? Why didn't I take Uber? Real alcoholics on the other side of the cell thinking, why did I take Interstate 70? Now, the court card people never laugh at that joke. That is not funny. You should have taken Surface Street. You could have been home cleaning your pipe tonight. Problem drinker's wife says, you don't stop drinking, I'm leaving you. Problem drinker cleans up his act, doesn't drink in the house, gets a little Visine. Now, if my woman says, honey, you don't stop drinking, I'm leaving you, you know what I'm thinking, right? I'm thinking about single life. And that was my relationship with liquor. If anything got in the way of liquor, it was out of my life. I mean, alcohol had me from hello. It completed me. It was the love of my life. You think I'm going to let go of the love of my life without a fight? I can't even let go of a bad relationship. Everything I let go of has claw marks all over it. And if you're new tonight, my relationship now with AA is exactly the same. If anything gets in the way of Alcoholics Anonymous for me, it's out of my life. A woman, I don't care how beautiful she is, how in love we are, my soulmate. I remember the first time I said that in a meeting, there she was in the back of the room. She's like, God, Adam, you don't look like an alcoholic. Why do you got to go to all those meetings? It's the weekend. Then she tells me, you're not speaking again, are you? And the relationship progressed, and then she tells me, you know, Adam, that AA thing, it's getting in the way of our relationship. So a couple months later, it's a big night. Now we're, the meet the parents night. We know that night, right? The one we dread. And she gets me a suit and tie. Out comes the exotic wine. I'm with her mom and dad. I'm at the head of the table. And she, puts a glass of wine in front of me. She says, honey, you can have 1 glass of wine. It's just, sweetie, it's just a glass of wine. It's a toast. It's natural wine. Oh, yeah, 4 more rehabs. I stole her purse that night. Went down to the hood and got an outside issue. And she came to detox with a get well card. Poor thing. I think I got 4 cards from that one. I could always tell the Al-Anons, they don't think any of this is funny. Right? Can't stand to see us have a good time even here. So my mom went to Al-Anon. My mother went to Al-Anon, and one day she comes home and she says to me, Adam, you know how many Al-Anons it takes to screw in a light bulb? I said, no, Mom. She said, none. The Al-Anon detaches it, lets it screw itself. See you later. She was brutal. But what happened by understanding these ideas is when I came back in my mother's life 5 years later, I'd gone through the steps of the traditions. I'd learned how to take the traditions off the wall and apply them to our family. Our common welfare comes first. Our family, our relationship depends on our unity. That means anything that's divisive is subject to question, right? For our relationships' purpose, for our family's purpose, there's a loving God. In other words, can we put God into our relationship? It was so powerful. And I went through all these ideas with my mom, Did we genuinely want to be together? And my mom became my very best friend. It was amazing. I learned all about outside issues. I learned about I didn't cause it, I can't cure it, I can't control it, I'm not going to contribute to it. And the real problem, because there's all these wonderful ideas, like the genetics loads a gun, the dysfunction pulls a trigger. We're up to 14 generations of dysfunction. And to be able to heal that through an inventory is absolutely miraculous. that what can actually happen, the transformation that can happen here by getting pen to paper. If you ever wonder why your family pushes your buttons, it's because they installed them. And what Alcoholics Anonymous does, it took that button off my forehead, it put it on a piece of paper, and it asked me to look at it from an entirely different angle. I absolutely hated my father. My father was never there for me as a little boy. And one of the parts of the book says, we realized that people who offended us were also perhaps spiritually sick. And then it says, although we did not like their symptoms, which is column 2, or the way it disturbed us, column 3, like ourselves, we're sick too. My sponsor said to prove that statement, everywhere you have a resentment, you have to ask yourself if you're capable of the same behavior. So if I resent you for gossiping, did I ever gossip? I resent you for lying, did I ever lie? I resent you for stealing, did I ever steal? I resented my dad for abandoning me. Did I ever abandon anyone I loved for my true love, alcohol? And there it was. See, forgiveness, if you're new tonight, is releasing someone from the prison of my own mind. It has nothing to do with them. Behind forgiveness is compassion. Behind compassion is empathy. This is an evolutionary process that walks me through the door of steps 8 and 9. I didn't understand that this is really a remarkable exercise. It's like if you see a bodybuilder, you want to look like him. You think you could sit around in the lobby of his gym and talk about working out for an hour? You'd have to do the exercises. And my home group challenged me to write that out, to go through that process. And my dad, you know, in 1935, my grandmother was hiding him under tables while Hitler was bombing London. At 9, she died of cancer. He was orphaned, went into the countryside where they were hiding kids from the bombings. At 14, he joined the military, went and served in the Korean War for 13 years. And I'm expecting this guy to treat me like Mr. Brady. I had no concept. And one day going through this process, my dad looks at me and he says, son, I was so sorry I wasn't there for you when you were a little boy. And he became my best friend. And I'm not saying this to get praise, but for the last 17 years, I took care of that guy with aggravated vascular dementia. I gave him 1,700 showers. On New Year's Eve, he fell and broke his back and died. But you know what? I was free. He was free. We loved each other. The last thing he said to me, son, I will love you forever. I wish he'd told me he hated me. I could have dealt with that. But for him to tell me that just broke me. And that was because of Alcoholics Anonymous. There's very little time left. One of the last things I want to say is I get to fly a lot. It's not to brag, but I was at this airport and I'm waiting to get on this plane. I'm dressed nice. I'm at the United Terminal, LA. And this guy comes charging me from across the terminal. And this is the way he looks. He's got the slingshot t-shirt, the full body tattoo, the neck thing. I know you girls like that look, right? The teardrops. And he gets me up against the wall and he's like, you don't remember me, do you, bro? And I'm like, no, I don't remember you. And I thought he was going to hit me up for money, really aggressive. And he had these 2 beautiful kids with him, 2 little girls and this lady by his side. And he looks at me and he says, 15 years ago, you spoke on a prison panel and something you said changed my life. He said, this is my beautiful wife. These are my kids. This is my family. We want to thank you. And all of a sudden, the wife starts crying. The faucet's on, the wife's crying. Now these 2 little kids are crying. Now I'm crying, right? A minute ago, I didn't know whether to take a swing at him or call security. And now we look like the long-lost family from the old country. So now my head's getting big. I'm thinking, I knew I was the Dalai Lama. So I make the mistake of calling my sponsor. My sponsor's like, Adam, you got a big mouth and a good memory. Don't let it go to your head. And he hung up on me. Had to ruin my moment, right? But if you're new tonight, there's 2 dates in a human being's life. The day we're born and the day we find out why. All my life, I thought it was about money, property, and prestige. Job, house, relationship, car. Bigger job, different car, different relationship. But if you're new, see, puke smells the same in a Mercedes. If you have what I have, you cannot do it. In the beginning of my life, I had everything, and I did not value it. But see, all my life, I'd chased money, property, and prestige. And what Alcoholics Anonymous asked me to do was to chase a spiritual way of life. Part of the word spiritual is ritual, just like the triangle we were talking about earlier. I chase a spiritual way of life, and somehow money, property, and prestige will chase me. It's just like I polish over here and I shine over there. If you're new, it's counterintuitive, but that's the way it works. If someone did to me what I did to myself, I would have killed him. If someone did to me what I did to others, I would have killed him. And then I come to AA and you want me to pray. I did not want God to find out where I was. I was bankrupt. If you look at those three relationships, the steps remedy those relationships. 1 through 3, recreate and develop a relationship with God. 4 through 7, recreate and develop a relationship with self. 8 and 9, recreate and develop a relationship with others. Very simple idea. 10, maintains, develops, and grows my relationship with self. 11, maintains, develops, and grows my relationship with God. 12, through service, maintains, develops, and grows my relationship with others. So coming out of the steps, a selfish, self-centered drunk like me is not only easily able to control my desire for alcohol, it's right out of the doctor's opinion, but for the first time in my life, I'm able to live in harmony with God, with self, and with others. There was a great spiritual teacher who was asked, what's the most important thing of all your teachings? He said, love God with all thy heart, love thy neighbor as thyself. And you know what? If God scares you out of AA and you're a real drunk, don't worry about it. Booze will scare you back in. So in 1 through 3, I give it up. 4 through 7, I clean it up. 8 and 9, I make it up. 10, 11, and 12, I keep it up. Wayne Dyer said, and I'll just finish with this. He said, you come to this earth with absolutely nothing. You will leave with nothing. Whether you're Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, you will leave here with nothing. He said, there's only one thing you can do while you're on this earth. Give it all away. And that's tough for a materialist, but that's not what we're talking about. If you're new tonight, the currency in Alcoholics Anonymous is experience, strength, and hope. That unique ability of every single person here has the ability to help somebody that no one else will be able to help. No one but you. Someone in your neighborhood, someone in your family, somebody that's connected to you. These degrees of separation. And by doing that, the promise is in that 7th chapter, to watch loneliness vanish, to have a host of friends. It says this is something you must not miss, the bright spot of our lives. There's a poem in Notre Dame. It says, I sought my God I could not see. I sought my soul I could not free. I sought my brother, and I found all three. That's why we talk about nothing ensures immunity from drinking more than intensive work with others. I want to thank Patrick. I want to thank all you guys that helped me. I was Plan B, I found out. Someone canceled, so I'm Plan B. It's okay. I'm on the B list. Thank you.